Good evening, everybody. Good to see you again. Still enjoying our time here, so nothing's changed there. Thank you, people who've been hosting this. We've had all kinds of meals. Certainly aren't going to go hungry this week. And happy to be back tonight to share with you some more thoughts about how we grow. Like Matt shared, crises of faith, one of those stages of growth that we talked about. We started last night with Sifted Like Wheat, with that lesson meant to help us prepare, meant to help us be ready for something that comes. And then tonight's lesson, we're still talking about that, but now it's how do we go through it? What's the other side? And, what's the growth process that happens when you're in that adversity stage that we're going to talk through? So just helping you kind of connect this together. We went through a lesson about our unkind selves. Part of that was really meant to be getting to the genuineness, right, and having that authenticity. These lessons are about the crises of faith. Tomorrow night, that lesson is really, it's geared to be in that section that was called kind of the experiential growth, or that experience with God, that relationship building. And it'll be about more having a relationship with God, not just knowing about God, but coming to know God. I think I'm saying all that to put off tonight's lesson a little bit, because I'm going to promise you it's the hardest one I ever give. 1 Peter 4, verse 12. Sharing these thoughts at first, just to set the stage for what I'm about to tell you. Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal among you, which comes upon you for your testing, as though some strange thing were happening to you. 1 Peter 5:9. But resist him firm in your faith, knowing that the same experiences of suffering are being accomplished by your brethren who are in the world. And after you've suffered for a little while, the God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself perfect, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. I share those things for a couple reasons. One, just to ground us in what we're talking about again. Two, because as I share a little bit about what our year's been like, I'm not sharing it for comparison reasons. I'm not trying to say I'm a better sufferer than you or anything like that. I don't know what you all are going through. It might be far worse than what we've been through this year. So we're all going to go through these experiences. Maybe not these, but some. We're going to go through some struggles. We've shared that. So I'll start just by recounting a little bit about what happened to us, and I'm just going to start it in March. Suffice it to say, I had some health issues before that. I'm doing okay now. In March, Julie and I are apart. I'm sitting at home. My two older sisters, I had 3 sisters at the time. My 2 older sisters had traveled from Evansville to visit my younger sister in Colorado. As they left, I got it this time, thanks. I found them. You guys have got them all over, so it's good. As they left and came back, I got a text a few hours later from my niece, one of their daughters, that the car had stopped and been stopped in a really weird place for a couple hours. Had they contacted me, I said no. And we waited and waited, and eventually news came out. You might have seen news about, in middle of nowhere, Kansas, a dust storm that came up, and there was a 70-car pileup on the interstate. Now, I don't know if anybody saw that. It was in March this year. My sisters were in that. We found out at 10 o'clock that night that the younger of my older sisters was alive. She was okay. Not okay. By no means okay. She was not dead. She was in a hospital. She'd been taken by ambulance. But there was no news about my other sister. And it wouldn't be till the next day, about 24 hours later, that we found out she had passed. And this started, those 24 hours were tough. We're pretty close family. And I will tell you, I was angry for about 10 seconds. Because you kind of knew it was coming. After that long, you kind of figured. And we got the news, and with the news came a picture. And I did not put the picture in the deck for your sakes, but it was a picture of the car they were in. And I don't know what Mad Max kind of movies you may have watched where they have these. I had never seen anything like it. Come to find out, they were driving. It was kind of like it was foggy, and then it was like a blanket was over the car. They hit the back of a semi hit them. So you can imagine what a Toyota Highlander might have looked like. And instantly hey, somebody lived through that, right? So that comes in. So we're in action. We're trying to figure out how to tend to my sister who's alive while trying to help the ones who are grieving. She's got all kinds of broken bones, but somehow no internal injuries. I can share more at another time. This is not all about that, but she's in a hospital. She gets 6-hour ambulance ride because they couldn't get a helicopter in the air because of the dust storm, and then needed to be flown in. She was actually here in Indianapolis, is where they did most of her surgeries, and she's recovering even right now. So we were with her in the hospital probably, over a period of a couple weeks here and there, trying to figure out how to be with her. We finally go back to Peoria. She's settled. Her family's with her in the hospital. Things are as okay as they're going to be. The day we get back and I'm at work, our son, 21-year-old at home, texts his mom that he'd gone to the bathroom on campus and a bunch of blood came out. I'm not trying to be gross, but that's what happened. We ended up with an 8-day hospital stay with him, not knowing for a couple days what was wrong. Ended up being not the worst thing in the world, a birth defect, some surgery, take out some stuff, and he's okay. As I'm sitting with him, the night that we actually got the diagnosis, I think they may have just taken him to surgery. I get my phone and get a text from my mother. She is a lung cancer survivor, and she had been having a cold, and so she sends me these MRIs of her sinuses and says, I think it looks like there's maybe a growth in my sinuses. Can you read this for me? 2 large brain tumors. So boom, boom, boom. That was March through June. She's alive, doing okay. But when you're in that is what our year started like. There's been good things too. So again, I'm not saying this to whine to you. I'm trying to tell you where the lesson came from. Because as that's all going on and you're piling those feelings on, I was very happy that my faith held up, and we'll talk about that toward the end of this. Because I'd been trying to prepare. I've been trying to listen, take my own medicine. So it led me to think, all right, I've got to bring this out in some kind of form, but I could not form the thoughts, and I'll get to this a little bit later, but what actually happened is I went to a technical conference of all things, a software conference, and there was a guest speaker there who somehow made this all connect up, and you'll see how in a little bit. But today what I want to walk you through are 4 questions. Why does adversity happen? Okay. What makes it happen? What's the point of it? What makes it difficult? So not only why does it happen, but why is it so hard? Okay, it's called adversity. You expect it to be hard, I get it. But what are the things that make it hard? How do I navigate it when I'm in it? And then what is my role in general when it comes to this? Okay, because we might be in different roles. It might be you that's suffering. It might be you that's helping. When you're in those roles, what should you be thinking about? How should you be acting? So we'll start with why does adversity happen? And it happens for a few reasons. The first one up there is just that normal life happens sometimes. We're in a world that's broken. We are fairly fragile creatures physically. We age, we have health risks. We do dangerous things, like driving. One of the most dangerous things we do. I was sitting there thinking about this when it happened that, we make the choices to go do that. And I don't think too many people have ever gotten themselves seriously injured walking in a dust storm. But we like the convenience of being able to go long distances and go fast. So we take chances, too. That's my point. Those things can all bring on some adversity in our lives. But that's not the only reason. It comes upon us sometimes for testing. We saw it in what we read in 1 Peter. I'm saving the passages in James and Romans for later because the answer to those passages answer this question, but they also answer the how do I navigate it question. And so we will read those passages when we come to that part of the lesson. A couple more, though, if you go over to 2 Thessalonians, there's some where it's a little less direct, but it tells us there are some reasons that we suffer. In 2 Thessalonians 1, 3 through 5, Paul says, we ought always to give thanks to God for you, brethren, as is only fitting because your faith is greatly enlarged, and the love of each one of you toward one another grows ever greater. Therefore we ourselves speak proudly of you among the churches of God for your perseverance and faith in the midst of all your persecutions and afflictions which you endure. This is a plain indication of God's righteous judgment, so that you may be considered worthy of the kingdom of God, for which indeed you are suffering. And so you see Paul calling out their perseverance, and you see him placing their suffering into a realm that says it's about proving your worthiness, right? It's part of what they're doing to make their mark that they're worthy. And you can see this in the stories of Job, in the stories of Joseph. You know, how God, through his plan for what's going to come, and for whatever purposes he has, sometimes sends testing and suffering to those who love him. Right? And those are very difficult circumstances. None of us read about Joseph or Job and think, oh, I'd like to go through that. But it puts them in the place they need, that God needs them to be, when he needs them to be there. And we would all hopefully say, I do want that to happen. Okay. Another reason, and we talk about Job again, that there's suffering, is that we do have an enemy. And we talked about just last night, who wants to sift us like wheat? It's not just that we're going to be sifted generically. Satan has demanded permission to sift you all like wheat. Right? That's what Jesus said to Peter. We see in the story of Job how that really worked out, right? As the accuser comes before God and just makes his case over and over again, that Job needs to have things taken away, that Job will curse God. And we see also that he doesn't. 1 Peter 5, 8, and 9, which we read a little bit of earlier, or over in Ephesians 6, verse 11. Right? 1 Peter 5, 8, you know, that's the Satan is a roaring lion seeking who he may devour. In Ephesians 6, we talk about our enemy there. Put on the full armor of God that you may be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. And the key to all of this is you don't get to know which one of these you're in. When you're suffering, you don't get to know if it's for testing. Is it just normal life? Is it Satan? Is it all of the above? You don't know. There's not an indicator in the sky that's going to tell you. Right? And so I tend to treat it as I should be learning something from this. Whether it's for my own benefit or for God's benefit or both. That's how I have tended to treat suffering in life, and it was no different for us this year. The other key is that we're not in control. We don't get to pick if we suffer. Sometimes we can not make some dumb choices with the normal life stuff. You know, I'm less likely to suffer maybe if I don't do certain things. For me, you know, if I don't try to do backflips, I'm probably not going to have as much back pain. Not really. Kenny would look like if I did a backflip and how quickly you'd have to get me to the hospital. But the point is, sometimes we can try to minimize our suffering, but not this kind of suffering. We're not in control of this kind of suffering. Right? If God wants to test you, you can do the Jonah and run away as much as you want. If he knows where you are, he's going to find you. If Satan wants to come after you, the same thing is true. Okay? We are in God's hands, and the whole world is in the power of the evil one. Those are both true at the same time. So we are not in control. And that's really the key here for, as adversity happens, how do I handle it? So this is the person who spoke in this conference. Usually you get to these conferences, they're motivational speakers, and they spend a lot of money to get really famous people. And they said this name, and I had never heard of it. I don't know if any of you have heard of Eric Weihenmayer. But he's a blind mountain climber who's climbed the tallest peak on each of the continents. His speech was not at all spiritual. There was not a trace. It was a business conference with a bunch of people dressed up, and he was there to help motivate us to go do wonderful things for companies, probably. I don't know. But his story had nothing to do with that either. It was about his life. But he brought forth some examples that I'm going to pull out in here because they really bring the story together. And so I'm going to ask you when I go through his examples, they're not spiritual, but we're going to lean into it like they are and see the spiritual implications of those examples. Just introduce you to him. He was a really funny guy. He came out, you knew he was blind, even though if you hadn't heard of him, you could just tell. He didn't have sunglasses on or anything. And he stands there, and everybody's quiet, and his first words were, "So I'm blind, and I don't really know if you're there unless you make some noise." Right. And that kind of set the stage for all of these stories that he would tell us. If you get a chance to check him out on YouTube, he's very motivational. Okay. So, I'm missing a slide, sorry. I feel like I might have deleted a slide in here, guys, but don't look. All right. I did, but it's fine. So as we talk about him, think about some things. Think about how many times Jesus listed the dangers of following him. Okay, Matthew 16. Over in Matthew 16, 24 through 26. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "If anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Whoever wishes to save his life shall lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake shall find it. For what will a man be profited if he gains the whole world and forfeit his soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul?" Or over in Luke 14. Luke 14, 26, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple." Verse 33, "So therefore no one of you can be my disciple who does not give up all his own possessions." And then finally, if you'll turn over to John, in John 15, verse 18, "If the world hates you, you know that it has hated of its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Remember the word that I said to you, a slave is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you. If they kept my word, they will keep yours also. But all these things they will do to you for my name's sake, because they do not know the one who sent me." And so as Jesus spoke, he talked about the fact that following him was not going to be easy. Okay. Now he's talking about it more in the sense of persecution. And that is one type of difficulty that we might encounter. We encounter it a little bit less than they do in other places in the world. Here, we're very blessed, I think, in the way that we live, and the persecution we do encounter is not usually the kind that's going to threaten our life. Maybe our pride sometimes, maybe occasionally, maybe our livelihood even, but not usually so far as our life. But in the world, that does still occasionally happen. So three things that I really want to talk about that make adversity difficult. One, it's difficult if you don't expect it. Expect no pain and no loss in your life. If you believe in a gospel that says life is going to be great as long as you're a believer, you're enshrouded with blessings and riches here on earth, and things are just going to be wonderful here, then you're missing the point of the gospel, and you're really in danger of adversity knocking you for a loop. Because all the things Jesus just said are true. All the things Jesus said to Peter are true. Right? The things we read about in Job and in other places, we are going to have difficulty in the world. Another reason it's tough is, and it's easy to say, but it hurts. It's designed to hurt. Adversity is tough. It's meant to hurt. The first quote from Eric is this: as you aim higher, you invite adversity into your life. Okay. And I really want that to kind of take home, because it was the first thing that clued me in, like, this guy knows what he's talking about. Obviously, maybe the being blind and climbing mountains might have got you, but for me, it was that quote. I'll say it again. As you aim higher, you invite adversity into your life. So if we're complacent, we might be fine. But when we want to be better, and here especially for Christ, especially for God, not just in the world, not just a better athlete or a better worker or but a better Christian, there are forces who don't want that to happen. And there are difficulties that will arise to help knock us off course. Okay? And that's some of what makes it difficult. And in the end, where we really land and where he landed is all of this. The pain that comes, the difficulty maybe of lost expectations. Like, I thought life was going to be easy. It wasn't supposed to be this hard. All of this. The way he talked about it is they're just barriers. The adversity is just a barrier. And you start to think of it not as pain, but as the thing that's in your way from where you want to go. And if that goal to you is really important, then the adversity takes a back seat. You're still going through it, but as you're navigating it, it's not as painful. You know, for him, he talked about the fact that as he was going up a mountain, every step he took, somebody had to tell him what to do. Okay. He's blind. He doesn't know where he's stepping. He doesn't know, okay, which foot should go where. Sometimes they're climbing. Sometimes they're walking. Where's the handhold? Well, there are times with the wind that he couldn't hear. Okay. And his idea in his head was, I'm just going to stand on that summit. Right? So in the moments where he was scared, he just waited because he was going to stand on that summit. And he either reached and found it, or he got help, and he was able to find it. In the moments of those in that moment of adversity for him, the barrier was fear. Okay, fear would have just told him to leave, but he decided it was better to overcome it. That's what we have to get through in our life, and we'll get to that really with navigating it. His second quote that really struck me was, you don't just deal with adversity. You use it to propel you forward. So it's not just a matter of dealing with it. You try to use it as fuel to drive you. He was able to take the energy of that fear and turn it into a better energy that drove him forward. And he found moments where, even in the difficulty, his disability was actually a positive. He talked about the fact that in the moment, I guess, and again, not a mountain climber, certainly not an Everest climber, there are places that they can't walk, and they take these, what are basically ladders that are tied together, and they put them over a crevasse so that they can crawl across the ladders. Maybe you've seen that on TV. And he was recounting how he was having a moment really where it was difficult for him, getting into sorrow because things weren't going great. They weren't going as fast. Maybe they weren't going to make it to the top. The storm was coming, whatever. And they put down this first set of ladders, and the first guy started to crawl out. And as he's having those thoughts, the guy that's crawling out says, "Hey, Eric, it's going to be really good. It's going to be really good to be you right now." Because he couldn't look down and see what was down there, right? And that buoyed him back up, right? His disability actually became a positive for the moment. The adversity can become a positive in a moment. It probably won't be like that because you're not a blind mountain climber. More than likely where you're going to find that, where I have found it, is a little bit of positive, good pride in God, in the fact that I can be an example. The fact that in a moment of suffering, I can actually come out of myself and do something for somebody else, and the multiplication effect that has on that example. So there are times things that make it difficult can actually become motivators for good. So spiritually, I think that's how we take his lesson. It's not just about dealing with adversity. It's about using it to navigate and propel you forward. All right. How about as you're going through it? If adversity is a barrier, what is our tendency with barriers? If I throw a barrier in front of you, or a lab rat in a maze, what's the first thing that they want to do? Go around it. That's the one thing you can't do in this case. You can't go around it. You can't just avoid it. You can try. If you try, you look at the story in Hebrews 12. Go over to Hebrews 12. And I actually like to start this, I should have put it on there, back in chapter 10. I'm not going to go look at it now. But if you look previously in the book, earlier they're commended by the author for what they used to be, how good they used to be at some of these things. But in Hebrews 12, 4 through 7, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding blood in your striving against sin. And you have forgotten the exhortation which is addressed to you as sons. My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor faint when you are reproved by him. For those whom the Lord loves, he disciplines, and he scourges every son whom he receives. It is for discipline that you endure. God deals with you as sons. What son is there whom his father does not discipline? This is a group of people who had previously been good. I promise you it's in there. We can talk about it later. And now they've stopped doing what they were doing earlier. And they're afraid. They're trying to avoid the barrier, which is shedding blood, and they're striving against sin. And we can't blame them, probably. There were people who were going to persecute them heavily. And what we see is a group of people here who were just pulling back a little bit. Let's not be so much about our faith in this moment. And they're pulling back. And the Hebrew author is telling them that the result of that is they're avoiding God's discipline. They're avoiding lessons they're supposed to learn. If we take this in context of everything we've learned, they're choosing not to become the people God wants them to become. They're choosing to limit their own potential by not participating in the discipline that God has set up for them to endure. I don't know how their story ended, but one thing I know is that eventually, if God wanted them tested, brethren, they were tested. You can't run forever, right? I don't know how their story ended, but they were fighting it. We have to work through the barriers. Fear of failing, fear of fighting problems never really leads to anything good. Think about it in your life, the time when you've been really afraid and you did a great thing. That's not usually how the story goes, right? Fear tends to drive us backward. Fear tends to make us shrink away. And sometimes there are things we should be afraid of. You see an uncaged animal out in the street, you're probably wise to back away from it. But if you have a goal to be a stronger, better Christian, that's not something to back away from. That's something to reach toward. And there are going to be barriers in your way. We can't just be afraid. In relationships, this can look like just a pulling back. And you think about it in a marriage relationship, what happens when two people do that? When they hit a barrier and instead of going through it together, they decide to pull back. It's never a good thing for the relationship, right? They tend to pull back separately. They tend to not speak very much to each other. Instead of working through the barrier that's part of their relationship, they dissolve further away. And the time when they get stronger, if they repair that, is the time when they come together and they go through whatever the barrier is that was blocking them. It's true in relationships. It's true in life. It's true with adversity that we fight. Another story from the speech. He talks about the way that he lost his sight. So he had his sight till he was about 11 or 12 years old. He was diagnosed at about 10 with a disease that he knew was going to take away his sight in a couple years. He talks about a time that he was already blind in one eye and the sight in his other eye was going. And he was already a very avid adventurer at that age. He was climbing things. And one of the things he liked to do was run his bike over the ramps. I don't think that's a picture of him. I can't remember. But he liked to take his bike. His dad had built him all these ramps, and he had a little course. And he talked about how this day he went out, and he went out on the bikes, on the ramps, and he was up in the air, and he just couldn't see the last one. Whatever position he was in, the way his vision was, and he fell, and he bloodied himself up and skin, and he took the bike back up to the garage, crying, walked inside, and said, "It's over." To do that again. Didn't know, because he couldn't see, that his dad was standing right there. His dad didn't say a word. Next morning, he gets up, goes out to get the paper, I think is what he said. His dad said, "Hey, Eric, go get your bike. I think you should try it one more time." He said, "Dad, I don't think my vision that's getting worse got better overnight when I slept. I couldn't do it yesterday. I can't do it today." He said, "I just think you should try it one more time." I said, fine. He got ready, got his stuff on, went, did it, got up in the air, and he said, somehow, I have no clue how, I could see it. And I hit that last ramp, and for 5 more weeks before I lost that sight, I was able to do what I loved. What happened is his dad got 6 friends, neighbors, and they painted those ramps bright orange in the middle of the night. As we get to the part about what our role is, whose ramps are you painting? Who are you doing that for? We do this much better when we're together. How do we navigate it? Go to Romans 5 and then James 1. These are the passages that talk about this in some depth. Romans 5, verse 1. Therefore, having been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom also we have obtained our introduction by faith into this grace in which we stand. And we exult in hope of the glory of God. Not only this, but we also exult in our tribulations, knowing that tribulation brings about perseverance, and perseverance, proven character, hope. And hope does not disappoint, because the love of God has been poured out within our hearts through the Holy Spirit who was given to us. I know we know this passage. We read it. It's a good way to prepare. When you're in the middle of adversity, you need to come to this and you need to believe it. We need to be able to come to it and say, something good is going to come eventually from this thing I'm going through. Tribulation brings about perseverance. As I persevere, my character is proven. The more character is proven, here, I don't think he's really talking about proving it to God or to anyone else, but we're proving it to ourselves. And that shows us what God does in us, and that leads to more hope. And you just start the cycle again. Right? Go over to James 1. James talks about it a little bit differently, but very similar concept. Verses 2 through 4, and then we'll read verse 12. Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance have its perfect result, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. Verse 12, blessed is a man who perseveres under trial, for once he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life from the Lord as promised to those who love him. It's all over. It's all over the New Testament. Suffering well, what it leads to. We know these passages probably better than most, but as you read, you'll see it more and more. Not always the same words, not always spelled out the same way, but it's a common theme. Consider it all joy when you encounter these trials. The testing of your faith produces endurance, perseverance earlier, endurance now, and endurance leads to a perfect result that makes us whole and complete, lacking in nothing. This is the process God takes us through to grow us. Rather than being whole and complete, we might say mature. We might say fully grown. We might say we've reached our potential. All other words we've used this week. This is how God gets us there. But we have a part in it. We got to go through it. You can't go around it. And as much as I talked about the fact that we paint each other's ramps, God does the same thing. God does not leave us alone to go through these things. He is there with us. I can say I don't like to do anything that ever seems like bragging. I was proud. My faith didn't waver in those 3 months. I thought it might. I don't know. I hadn't been through that. Been through some stuff. We can share stories. I hadn't been through all that. I told Julie it kind of felt not like Job with what I suffered or what we suffered, but I did kind of feel like and only I have survived to tell you. It was just like boom, boom. Right when you think you're back in, and now you got another set of wood to do. But my faith didn't waver, and I think the reason my faith didn't waver, one reason, obviously it's because God was there. We had spent some time preparing. We had smaller trials that we thought about as we went through them. It was a real exercise to say, this is something we need to do and need to do well. It's hard to bring it out, the process, and that's what I really struggled with. What is a really good example to say, let endurance have its perfect result, that you'll be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing? What's a good life example that I can show you? I don't know if I have one. But the speaker provided one. He talked about not himself, but another friend, a friend of his who was also a mountain climber. He could see, but he was in a horrible accident in New Hampshire climbing a mountain and lost both of his legs. He got left in the cold for a long time and lost both of his legs. You can look up this guy's story. It's another great story, very inspiring. But at the moment the picture was taken, he was considering killing himself because it was over. Okay, so he was in the depths of trying to deal with this new life that he had come to. So that's not the one that tells you the story, and neither is this one, even though he works through that adversity, goes back and completes a PhD in biotechnology, now runs MIT's lab for prosthetics, is one of the foremost builders and inventors of some of the best prosthetics in the world. So he was driven to make life better, not really for himself, but for people like him. And then he benefited himself. But what's maybe even more impressive than that about his story, and what I'm trying to do is show you so take the spiritual example of what I'm about to show you, because I think this is exactly how God works in us. He's working through with endurance. Not only does he do this, but look on the left, if you can see, he's a rock climber. And Eric, who's also the blind rock climber, said what he heard is that this guy, Hugh, had climbed a pass, solo free climbed a pass in the Red Rocks in southern Nevada that no one had ever been able to climb before. So, the guy with no legs is the one you think is going to do that. But he had heard that it happened. He said that he reached out and talked to the guy. He called him and said, "Hey, I just heard this story. Is it true?" Yeah, it's true. I was able to do it." "How'd you do it?" "I just made my legs a foot longer." It's funny. Now think about it spiritually. There's the example. You go through adversity, and God can do this with you. He can turn you into what you weren't, make you better and stronger than what you were, replace what you've lost infinitely, and let you be a powerhouse for Him. You can make your legs a foot longer, spiritually. Probably not really. So I wouldn't pray for that exactly. I don't know what you'd even do if that happened. He can take his off, most of us, I think. But that, to me, shares the example well. This is what it looks like when endurance has its perfect and complete result, lacking in nothing. You go through it, you become better on the other side. That's what God has in mind for us. Finally, I'll end with what's my role. If you're the one suffering, your intention is to grow. God has placed adversity there so that you can aim higher and overcome it, so that you can be better on the other side. You should pray, and pray a lot when you're going through it. I cannot remember my prayers the night that we didn't know the fate of my sister. They were not coherent. They probably didn't have real words in them, but they were heart to God, and they were real. And you need to lean on your support. If you don't have support, this is going to be much, much harder. If you're here tonight, you can find support all around you. I don't know you guys that well, but I can feel that in this group. So if you're here and you think you're alone, you don't have to be. Choose to do this with others. Our tendency when we're in pain is to withdraw, every human being. When something hurts, emotionally, mentally, physically, our tendency is to back up, cocoon ourselves, and try to heal. It's fine for a day. It might be fine for a week. It's not good for you long term. If it's not something that's getting fixed quickly, you can't really do it alone very well. And even if you're great at it, even if you're really good at being alone, this is something that you're meant to have a network to help you with. And on the other side of that, if you're the one who is supporting, you're the one that's helping. Be there for them. Paint their ramps. Find the things you can do to take some of the pain out of the landing or the cushion. Cushion the blows. You can't fix it. Don't pretend you can. Sometimes being silent around somebody who's suffering is the best thing. The people who were the most comforting to me, I think, probably said the least. It was just their presence, right? But mostly, don't let me quit if you're helping me. Listen to me. I might talk about wanting to quit. I might be Hugh at the early stages of losing my legs. But remind me what I can be. Remind me what the purpose of this is. Remind me that I need to aim higher. And in so doing, I need to overcome the barriers. A final story, and then the lesson's yours. Back to Genesis 32. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of background. As you read Genesis 32, you've got Jacob. And he's between two terrible places. He's running away from danger on one side, and he's running toward danger on the other, and he's in the middle, and he doesn't know where he should go or what he should do. And in the middle of that, he wrestles with God. Okay, and that's what we're about to read. But what I want you to think about here is how he handled that wrestling with God. I don't think we're going to be physically wrestling with God. I don't think he's going to be putting our hip out of socket like he did here. But in our mind, it's going to feel a lot like that's what we're doing, right? In verse 29 of this, Jacob asked God and said, "Please tell me your name." But he said, why is it that you ask my name? And he blessed him. Okay, I'm sorry. It's verse 26 that I want. After God has dislocated Jacob's thigh, verse 26, God says, "Let me go, for the dawn is breaking." But Jacob says, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Okay. And then in verse 28, which we read, God does bless him. Jacob asked him please tell me your name. He said, why is it you ask my name? And he blessed him. Verse 29. Jacob named the place Peniel, and he said, I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been preserved. I'm not getting all the depth of that in that quick reading that I would like, but the point I want you to see is that in the middle of that fight, even though he was hurt, he didn't let go of God. He clung for a blessing. And I would encourage us to do the same thing tonight. If you're going through adversity, if you're wrestling with God in that way, don't let go. Keep wrestling. Cling to God for a blessing. That's what Jacob did, and we see in this passage all kinds of wonderful things. If you haven't really read it before, there's so much depth in there. But for tonight, take that from it. So a few things to leave you with. Adversity is a barrier, right? If you're trying to aim higher, you're inviting that barrier, you're inviting adversity into your life, and you can use that barrier to propel you forward. Thank you for listening tonight. If there's any way we can help you, I know some of you are struggling, you've told me, struggling with what's happened in the past, struggling with what's happening right now, struggling with what might happen tomorrow. Let us know. If you're not a Christian and you want to be one, let us know. Start a path with God now, because he is amazing and he is good. Please come forward while we stand and sing.